Welcome to another Tuesday Triggers session. We have our guest, Zach, the co-founder of Octave. I'm super excited to chat with you, bro, because, obviously we go back, but I think that, my whole focus with these and with these kind of sessions, if you will, is always to interview people that I think are cool, tech that I think is really interesting, products that I think may really positively impact people, especially people in the space. So would love to just kick it off, give you a minute to like intro yourself and then we can dive in.
Man, thank you for the intro. It's been awesome, obviously getting to know each other as friends, and um yeah, we're pumped about what we're building, and I think part of it comes from um my background was in sales. I was an SDR 15 years ago and carried a bag for a long time. Like I know how hard it is, and I think we're trying to bring that to what we're building. And I think hopefully, what's like getting people excited is sales is an art and science problem. It can't be purely solved by tech. And I think that the people that are in the trenches know that, and we do too. And we're trying to build like really thoughtful tools that take that into account and can actually solve problems. And so, the long winding road to that, like how'd we get here was, a long time, like I said, spent in the trenches. But I think, one kind of neat story, and I know some people in the community know my co-founder Julian as well. And so we met each other at a previous startup, actually, he co-founded. And kind of the interesting story there for us was we had a really, really powerful technology. It was completely outside of the go-to-market tech world. We were working on a trust and safety platform as an API. The challenge there was we had this like unbelievably powerful, differentiated tech. No one else could do what we did. And we helped people with this wide range of problems, right? We could help you if you had credit card fraud or account takeovers, or you had child pornography on your platform, like all these horrible things. We're helping solve real problems. But like you can imagine, there's a million and one kind of use cases in that spectrum. So it was really, really difficult for us in terms of the go to market. Like the tech was hard, but we knew what to build. We knew how to solve problems. And what became the real challenge was how do we take this to market in a coherent way? What are the stakeholders we're going after? Is this a product problem? Is this an engineering problem? Is this a compliance and legal issue? And so that was where kind of Julian and I really, found this problem that we fell in love with, which was, man, if there was an operating system, if you will, that could kind of like understand this like quantum web of go to market, like that would be magic. And so that was, the conversation over beers and happy hour for a long time. And, eventually 5 years later, generative AI came around and we said, shit, like we might be able to actually do something here. And so that's the super long answer to, how we found ourselves here and trying to build Octave.
That's awesome, man. Well, on that note, Octave is many things to many people. So why don't you give a rundown of kind of maybe the most common reasons people might use Octave with their go-to-market strategy?
Yeah, for sure. I think ultimately what we want to be is the home for your ICP. Your core messaging and positioning. What do you do? Who's it for? Why are you different? Why are you unique? That we believe is like worthy of a purpose-built home. Like the one of the things in our app, we ask you a question is like status quo. Like what do people do without your solution? And like our answer to that is like Notion, PowerPoint, Google Docs. It's this critically important, like foundational piece of your kind of company. Like, why the hell do you exist? Why should people be giving you time and money? And that kind of lives in all these like static places that become like, it's having it up here is the way you operationalize it. So like ultimately, like that's the problem we want to solve now. So people come to us for like helping solve that kind of matrix, if you will. Like, okay, I sell payroll software. I care about HR, IT, and finance personas. Okay, like we can kind of help you through that. But like, how do I talk about payroll to a e-commerce, or sorry, how do I talk about payroll to a retailer that you're going to have lots more employee turnover? You have lots of hourly employees. Like I'm going to talk, even as something like payroll that applies to every business world, I'm going to talk to you about that solution a lot differently than if I'm talking to a software company that everybody's on salary. It's a different type of business. And so we're really helping people like how do you like tighten that aperture further and further so you're talking to people in a really relevant way? So like that's the kind of meta problem. Be like day to day, like what do people do? Well, we've built a nice mousetrap that like takes that conceptual idea that we all want to like put into this framework, and like how do we plug that into our tools? How do we plug that into play and what we're doing on a day to day basis? Like how do we make sure we're like reinforcing that relevancy at scale? And like that's, I guess, part of the magic of where the rubber meets the road is, once you have this brain that you can kind of instantiate in Octave, how do you start passing in people and companies and like us actually trying to reinforce that, like, hey, let's make sure everybody knows exactly why we matter to them is
Yeah.
the core job.
So, it does, yeah. So it does a lot of things.
Yeah.
Let's talk about like, so I'll give you an example of my use case, right? So, as an agency owner, we come in and we create personas. A persona is like, typically one-to-one with a company, right? So
Yep.
one with one of our clients, right? We help build their kind of sales doc really, really quickly. We then go in and we say, who are they targeting? Okay, they're targeting all of the many different titles that might be targeted for a different reason. We then plug it into play. And so that kicks out like, here's the pain points for a director of marketing. Here's the pain points for a VP of sales. Here's the pain point for a CMO. Here's the pain point for all of these different things. And it prepares all of those. We then plug in the play really, really easily. And it really just like after we find the people that kind of run those titles, it kicks out like 3-4 email sequences that are really thought provoking, right? So really I guess like kind of like what I use it. Maybe you can describe how people are using it in your own words, even if it's the same description, right?
Yeah.
So I would love to hear you say, hey, this is how most of our clients come in and use it, like in step 1, step 2, step 3, and step 4.
Yeah. I think there's probably like, there's kind of like 3 phases, I'd say, for like most agencies, like where we're kind of like, where they're going like, all right, because I have Octave, I have more horsepower, my team, my company. So I'd say like first phase is how do you get, how do you be differentiated with clients, frankly? Like how do we not be looked at as just, appointment setters and meetings? How do we go to them with a perspective on like, I can help you figure out your ICP. Like if you don't figure out who your ICP is and why you're relevant to them, like you're dead, right? And I can help you do that. So I think the people that I see be most successful with our platform, like they're using like our machinery and the scaffolding we can put around these ideas of personas and use case value props and pain points, and like that being the first foot forward with the client, right? Like saying like, hey, here's our perspective on like how we might be able to help you. Let me get your feedback. Does this make sense? Right. So like that just puts you on, I'd say, a different level than most other agencies out there. And so I'd say like, that's kind of, the first thing I see where, we work with people and they get the idea like, ooh, a playbook isn't just for like plugging into clay. Like I can go present this as like, come work with me. Like I know what I'm doing. So
Yeah.
that's like phase 1. Phase 2 is then kind of connected to that, right? Like, okay, we have these cool assets. Like we have a like surface to collaborate with a client of like, hey, do you agree? Do you not? Where are the gaps? Where do we tune this thing? And we can do that in a place that, again, like isn't kind of floating off and like disconnected in a Google Doc or a Notion or something. We can do that on a service in Octave. That the cool part is like, yeah, we tune these playbooks, and then like underneath that is our model and the APIs that you can plug into Clay. So I'd say, phase 2, if you will, is like, how do you close the gap from like, it can take days and weeks to like launch these campaigns. So like, hey, like client, do you have an hour to like tune this thing up? Cause we can launch this thing tomorrow, so just like closing that gap, being obviously more efficient there. And then I'd say the, phase 3, if you will, like I keep going with this metaphor, is like this whole process, like, as we all know, is incredibly iterative. Rarely do we nail it the first time. Like it takes constant tuning, and like the market's shifting under us too. Like
Yeah.
the second anything stays static, it's dead, right? So that just like overall flywheel, right? Like how do we keep iterating, figure out like how can we keep improving these angles? What are new things we can test? What are new use cases? What are people fighting on? How do we fast follow that with a even crisper idea? So like using the platform as a way to just continually like accelerate and iterate. And I'd say like that's where, again, not to be too abstract about it, but like that's where the value's coming from. And then obviously the like, again, it's the APIs in Clay giving lots of knobs and dials to kind of like do this stuff in real time.
Why do you think that Octave is, like you said, the space is changing, which I'll ask about in a minute, but what about Octave makes it be able to adapt to all of these changes that are constantly happening in trends and like,
Yeah.
for example, Cladima?
I guess kind of like the heart of that question is like, what makes Octave? Like, why are we unique? I'd say, kind of like the first thing we talked about, I think go to market is part art, part science. Like I guess myself as a founder, like I'm not worried about like two whiz kids coming out of Stanford with PhDs that they're gonna like come out like they're not gonna be able to solve this problem any better than I am because it takes kind of a level of domain experience and yeah, there's some dark magic that you kind of need to know. And so I'd say like the core there, like our secret is, I'll tell you the secret is we can get more out of the LLMs. Like we haven't built our own LLM, right? We're using Claude, Gemini, and GPT like everyone else. But what we've invested, now almost 3 years in is like a very, very opinionated kind of schema of like, how do all of these things tie together? Like, how does a pain point and a piece of social proof and a reference customer and a value prop and a use case, like what's the relationship between all of those kind of entities? And like, that's just something like the LLMs can't do it. It's not like there's no chemistry textbook. There's no physics textbook. There isn't the textbook for go-to-market of like how all these things relate together. It's kind of this like, it exists in the ether from people who've done it. And we've put the effort in like under the hood of like, what's the relationship? So it's like, that's when you're using Octave, like that's what's giving these results and allowing us to, again, the heart of your question, why can we iterate? Well, because we kind of understand these nodes it's all quantum and it can all be changing, but there is some like underlying graph of like how these things generally relate to each other. And that's the magic people feel, if you will.
Do you think that most people are using Octave to write fully AI written email sequences and develop customer personas? Some other use case that maybe other people are using that I don't know about.
I'd say, look, right now, I'd say that's the, what's on the truck that people are buying. I'd say bulk that, right? And there's a variety of benefits. There's the like, hopefully we're
Yeah,
helping you,
it's awesome, by the
yeah,
way.
yeah. It's cool. And, we're selling a lot of it because it works. We're getting you, again, tightening the target. So we're taking better shots on goal. And then like we all know, like, the deliverability landscape is obviously changing, like having highly unique variations, like in the email, like that helps too. So I'd say,
That's a huge, I mean, again, it's a huge plus, right? So here's the rub for us is like, yes, the landscape changes, right? There's a lot of people like my good friend Justin Chi, like he writes like very not super personalized emails, but he writes just incredibly great emails that highlight companies' value props. He does incredibly good targeting and small batch emails.
mhm,
And doing that, you can write people with the right messaging. They tend not to mark things as spam,
mhm,
right? Where you get in trouble now is people blasting out a million emails and saying about unlimited TAM, not doing very good targeting.
right.
Uh, when they could send half the emails with tighter targeting and it would burn their infrastructure left.
Right.
And so one of the big things with us is just writing customized emails that are non-templated. They tend to that are good. Again, as long as they're good, which your guys are, people don't do not like well, this is spam, screw this guy, right? And so ultimately, the impact is much greater. Having good emails has a ripple effect on
Yeah.
others.
Yeah.
So I think that like that's one of the. I was going to ask you like where do you see the landscape changing and how does Octave fit into it? But for me, that's it.
Yeah.
Is I can write fully written emails. I can create personas and playbooks for our clients incredibly quickly, and all of that is incredibly quick. And it impacts deliverability inevitably in a
Yeah.
positive way. It keeps my system running because the more you put bad shit in, the more bad shit comes out and the more it changes your system, right?
Right.
And so again, by putting this clean, good, well-written emails in here, it just keeps things going. So,
Oh,
that being said, where do you see the space going, and where does Octave fit into that in the next couple of years as email changes?
yeah. I mean, I think a lot of things are happening. It's interesting. That's awesome, by the way, to like hear from you, like how you think it's, impacting your business. I think over the kind of like next horizon, I'd say like part of what we're really focused on, I think there's a lot of companies that are kind of slightly off target right now, and it's gonna lead to, subpar outcomes for their company and like subpar solutions for customers. And I think kind of the problem relates to like what you were just saying, which is it's really relevance at the end of the day that like that's the bullseye. I think a lot of people like as AI evolves, the shiny thing off in the distance that everybody wants that's unachievable is this like, how can I mimic a person? Right? There's like far too much effort being put into how can I make this seem like it's not AI? And like that's a terrible goal because it doesn't matter. Like to your point, what matters is like I land a message with somebody that they go, I know it's meant for me. I
Yeah.
don't care who wrote it. Like it doesn't matter. I'm going to respond or not, but it's like that's the bar. And so, again, this is, not saying what all our plans are to reveal all of them, but I'd say that's something we keep like very near and dear is like, okay, what's the ultimate goal? Like relevancy.
Yeah.
I think we're going to be doing a lot more to like, how do we keep increasing the bar of just like, we just want every shot you take to be just as tight as possible. And so you'll see more things on the platform of ingesting more signals we know are important. We have great partners in the space and we're going to partner with more people. Like that's obviously a part of the story. The more we can understand what's happening in this web around your prospects. So we'll be doing more of that. And I think that's obviously a trend we're all seeing play out that I know is going to become just more and more important. There's still a huge swath of companies and people who, to your point, like they're not playing with that stuff at all. Sometimes it's a cost thing. Sometimes it's a laziness thing. Sometimes it's just they don't know what to do. So can we make those things easier? If we have, I'd say one thing we're thinking a lot about is like fundamentally, if we have your personas, we understand the use case, we know what you do, we know the problems, like, can I just go help you find the right signals? Like, do I need you to do that legwork as well? So I'd say like those are some things I think, for us over the next few humps, we're going to be thinking a lot about like, all right, if I fundamentally understand your business, like how can I help you do more of these jobs with the end goal being relevancy? Like that's our North Star.
Yep. Love it, man. Well, awesome. I love chatting with you, and always super stoked to be just the further we get into Octave and rolling it out for comments. So, outside that, man, thanks for coming on. I'm
Yeah.
sure again in the next month or two, but I appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, this is fun, man. Always.